We want to talk about, okay, well, there are ways to improve your strength that go beyond just adding more weight onto the barbell, moving down the stack on the machine, grabbing the heavier dumbbells. There are things that you can do that don't involve adding more load or more resistance. They'll actually go a tremendously long way to improving your strength. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. And if you are looking for a way to exercise on your own from the convenience of your own home using minimal equipment while still receiving guidance from myself and Julie, then you need to check out the MAS at-home workout program. This program is a 75-day video-guided program that includes over 100 workouts, from resistance training to cardio to mobility workshops and recovery days. To learn more about this program and download your copy now, go to homeworkout.matschaumburg.com. Today, we are talking about an exercise-related topic, and it's something that we hear a fair number of people talking about, and it's this idea of building strength. And a lot of times when it comes to building strength, people think, oh, I just need to lift heavier. I need to lift more weight. But actually, that's not the case, and that's what we want to discuss with you today.
That's right. I think one of the ways that you can increase your strength is by increasing the weight that you're lifting on a machine. But it is certainly not the only way. We're talking about this today because very often people feel that that is the only way. And because they feel that's the only way, and if they don't like that way, then exercise and weight training might not be for them, or building strength might not be for them because, I don't want to just go to the gym and start lifting heavier and heavier and heavier weights. So we're going to talk about today, and actually I'm excited about this because it's going to be a lot of practical tips that you can change up your workout with right away. We're going to talk about today ways that you can change your workout up to start increasing your strength and change the stimulus on your body with ways of, yes, we could increase the weight, but other ways that we could include as well.
So, what might be some issues with just strictly trying to increase your strength by increasing your weight? Okay, well, clearly, if you are using more weight, that's more force going through your body. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, when it's done over an extended period of time and done using the same kind of joint motions and joint positions over and over and over. And I think most importantly, done with muscle imbalances that are not addressed, that can cause, or that can be a contributing factor to excessive wear and tear on the joints. Okay, like we've talked about in the past with, say, like chronic cardio, where you're doing reps of the same joint motion. Well, if you're doing the same thing when you're working out, reps, but now you're doing it with heavier and heavier loads, and your body isn't really prepared for that from a muscle contraction standpoint, meaning your muscles aren't working well, can't support your joints as optimally as they should be able to, that has the potential to then lead to kind of more chronic joint issues, as well as, other kind of soft tissue issues and passive tissue issues. So with that, we want to talk about, okay, well, there are ways to improve your strength that go beyond just adding more weight onto the barbell, moving down the stack on the machine, grabbing the heavier dumbbells. There are things that you can do that don't involve adding more load or more resistance. They'll actually go a tremendously long way to improving your strength.
So I think one of the first and easiest things that you can do with keeping the same weight that you've already been using, but adding a new stimulus to improve your strength, is to add isometrics. And the way you can do this, there's a couple ways actually. So one is you can do strictly isometrics, which is you hold a position and you don't move. A classic example of an isometric is a plank, but I want to put this in perspective into another exercise that's not traditionally isometric, because that one you're already doing isometric. So for example, here's one a lot of people know about: a bicep curl. You're standing there, you got dumbbells in your hand probably, and let's say you're at 10s, and the next weight you have are 15s, and 15s are just not going to work because they're just a little too heavy. So you're like, okay, well, what can I do with these 10s to build my strength before I can get to 15s, right? So you can add an isometric to this. So you could take that exercise and turn it into a strict isometric, which means you pick some part of the range, maybe let's say right smack dab in the middle. So your arms are at like 90 degrees bent, and you just hold there. And you can do holds of 15 seconds 3 times through, or, whatever, fits the correct stimulus for your muscle. And that's a great way to incorporate isometrics. Now, I don't want you to think that because I've suggested 90 degrees of the elbow, there's some magical thing that happens at 90 degrees of the elbow, because you could do it at the top of the range. You could do it, 1 inch off the bottom of the range. You can pick any spot in that range and just hold it. The second way you can incorporate isometrics, which will help increase your strength, is you can add an isometric in the middle of the movement. So here's an example. I'll give you 2 because, again, I don't want to give you one and be like, well, Julie said this is the one. I got to try this way. So one way is you could do your bicep curl, and at the very top, like when you're done moving and bending your elbow, you could hold that top position for X amount of seconds and not move. Of course, still squeezing your muscles, because that's one of the foundational things of exercise or weight training. And then after you've held that position for however long you're going to do it, you can slowly go back down. So you can pick that top position to hold an extra amount of time. You also can pick any other position in the range. For example, let's say you slowly start bending your elbows, and as soon as your elbows hit 90 degrees, you hold for 5 seconds. And then you finish the range, you go all the way up, and then you go back down, and you hold for 5 seconds when you hit 90 again, and then you go all the way down till your arms are straight. So you can choose different places in the range that you want to hold and incorporate an isometric, and that will really add a muscle stimulus without adding weight to your dumbbell.
Yeah, I love this tip. Personally, I'm a huge fan of using isometrics within my strength training routine. And I think a third way that you can incorporate it is, instead of doing a weight that you have the ability to move and then just holding it, you can also push against an immovable object. And so you're not moving because the object itself doesn't move. And you can do this on a machine. You can do this, with a barbell if you pin it correctly, so the barbell itself won't move. If you put, enough weight on the weight stack on the machine, and then you're just like pushing at whatever intensity you want to. It doesn't have to be as hard as you can, but that's a very easy way to do an isometric where you're just focused on squeezing your muscles, and you aren't adding, additional load, because you're not moving anything, right? It's not like you have that weight suspended at all. So to me, that's a third way that I think isometrics can be incorporated to improve strength without adding more load to your body.
Hey, so one you left out, Charlie, that is an example of that we do in the home workout program, and we've done in the One Workout Away challenge, because, we're trying to help people exercise with minimal equipment, is grab something that doesn't stretch. And we often will suggest a towel, like a big towel. I was also thinking you could also use a jump rope. You could take a seat, throw it under your feet, and then
a belt.
A bicep curl type movement. But again, you can apply this concept to any exercise, not just bicep curl. I'm just using that as a good example because pretty much everyone's got a clear picture of what a bicep curl is.
Right. So the second way that you can increase your strength without adding more load to your body is to do the weights that you normally do, but do it to a higher level of fatigue. So let's go back to the biceps curl. And let's say you normally do 20 pounds for your dumbbell bicep curls, and you normally do, 10 reps with that. Okay. Well, let's say typically when you do 10 reps, you stop maybe when your exertion level is like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Like you're fatigued, you definitely feel your biceps burning, but you have a few reps left in the tank, okay? Well, one thing you could do is push that exertion level from a 7 or an 8 to like a 9 or a 10. Like go until you cannot do another rep. And then guess what? That last rep that you do, that's literally your 1 rep max weight. Even though you clearly have the strength to do more than 20 pounds as a 1 rep max curl, because you fatigued yourself in that moment, that 20 pounds becomes your 1 rep max weight. Okay. And so what that means is you are recruiting your biggest motor units in order to move that weight, because that becomes your new 1 rep max in that moment with that level of fatigue. What alters that means is you are going to get a much greater response from your muscles from a muscle protein synthesis standpoint. So similar to how if you were to lift a heavy weight and you recruit really large motor units in order to move that weight, if you do a lighter weight but do it to a higher level of fatigue, that same kind of response will happen.
So Charlie, you brought up a really good point, and I want to break down a few barriers that you might be thinking of when Charlie's saying this. So what Charlie's saying is that you're using the same weight you always used, but you're going to fatigue the muscle or work the muscle to a more intense level than what you have previously done. When I hear that, sometimes I think of my clients that say, but I thought we were doing like 10 reps. But guess what? Sometimes you can break the mold, and even though you've always done 10 reps, maybe then today that's the day you're going to try for the 11th and 12th rep, because you do get to get that extra stimulus if you do those extra reps. And guess what? Unfortunately, even the most perfectly planned program of all the correct reps and all the correct weights will never know how to get your muscle exactly to that fatigued point. It's making good guesses, especially if it's a nicely created program, but it's our responsibility as the exerciser to then take our body to the level of fatigue that we want to take it to. And so sometimes that means that we have to do a few extra reps, or sometimes that means you get to the max level of reps before the pre-programmed amount of reps happens. I want to bring up one other point to help you achieve this, because you might be thinking, okay, Charlie, got it. So I'm doing my 20s, and you're saying that I'm going to take it to like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 fatigue level. And normally I take it to a 7 out of 10. I got that. But what happens when you're using your 20s and you're doing good form, because that's the given, but you start losing range and you're like, hold on. But I feel like I'm still at a 7 out of 10, but I'm losing range. What do I do? Well, guess what? When you lose range, your mechanics, like your muscle mechanics, don't ever get compromised, which is really cool. So you're going to lose range as your muscles fatigue. That's a normal response of fatigue in the muscle. That's what happens. So what I recommend is you just keep doing your reps, keep perfect form, but let the range kind of die. Like you're doing 100% of the range, and then when you get at an 8 out of a 10, you notice that you also start going to like 80% of the range. Guess what? That's okay. Keep doing it. And then when you get at a 9 out of 10, now you're at like 50% of the range. That's okay. Keep doing it. So sometimes you can work on that intensity piece, and you can lose range and still be very, very safe. It would be the opposite story if somehow our muscles started giving us more range, but that's not how it happens. So you never have to really worry about that. When you start losing range, you can also try to get to a higher level of intensity, which can really bring about those cool muscle benefits that you might not have otherwise gotten if you were like, well, I have to do my full range every time. But guess what? Your muscles are fatiguing. They're going to lose range. And it is completely safe to keep pushing with the weights if you're losing range.
Now, disclaimer, if you do this, how Julie and I have described it, it's not going to feel good, at least not for most people, okay? Not saying there's going to be joint pain, but that burning sensation that you normally get when you get, I don't know, maybe a 7 out of 10 fatigue, and then you definitely notice it when you get to an 8 out of 10 fatigue. If you do what Julie just said, where you're going to keep going and you're going to keep going until you can barely move it anymore, like she was saying, like I was suggesting, your muscles are going to be burning at a level that you have not experienced before. That's not a bad thing. Just letting you know, full disclosure, that's what's going to happen, okay? Because you are taking your muscles to a much greater level of fatigue than they've been at before. But what's really cool is you will get much greater changes within your muscles by going to that level of fatigue. In fact, there's a really neat paper that demonstrated that doing lighter weights, like 30% of your 1 rep maximum until failure, creates more muscle protein synthesis than doing really heavy weights, but doing it for less time, even if you're going to a similar level of fatigue, okay? So the fatigue is really important, but the other aspect of this is because you just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, and yes, you're losing range, but you keep pushing. You're doing it for a longer period of time, which is going to get more of that muscle protein synthesis going, which is going to culminate in not only bigger muscles, but also stronger muscles.
That's right. I do need to put a little safety tip in here because I don't want you to listen to this, do it, and then be like, oh my gosh, I listened to Charlie and Julie and now my biceps feel blown. Okay, so one of the things when we start feeling fatigued is that we want to compromise our form. And I just said that one of the things that you can compromise is your range of motion, which is not one that normal people like to compromise with. What people normally like to compromise with are changing the moving and the non-moving parts. So if you think about any form for any exercise, form is basically a description of these parts are going to move and these parts are going to not move. And usually when we get tired, we like to start moving the parts that shouldn't move to help get us the extra range. So for a bicep curl, what that might look like is a good form for a bicep curl is if your whole body and your whole upper arm is not moving, but then your elbow and down is moving. So the elbow down, like your forearm area, is the only part that moves when you do the bicep curl. So when someone gets tired, or if you have poor form, you'll notice someone using their body to kind of hike it up or start manipulating the weight to get it up. So when you do this, you cannot break that form of what you decide is going to move and what you decide is going to not move. The only part that you get to change is how far you go. And you only get to change it if it's going less far, because then that's due to muscle fatigue.
Now, one other thing that you can do, so kind of where we've gone so far when it comes to building strength, all right, there are different aspects that the end result is strength, all right, so it's like the actual kind of mechanical aspect of the muscle and building that. Then there is the neurological function of recruiting your really large motor units to get your largest muscles to contract to then be able to produce the highest amount of output. But there's also the skill aspect of strength, okay? And that is, there's a skill in being able to recruit really large motor units, but there's also a skill in being able to do movements very, very, very well and kind of control your body very, very, very well. That's often part of the reason why you see people who are in their 50s, 60s, and above can still have really high levels of what we might consider to be like weight room strength, even though their muscle mass may not be as much because they have been practicing that skill for a really long period of time. And so they have just kind of ingrained it within their body, how to move their body very efficiently when performing this outward skill. So one thing that you can do is something called, the name that's often thrown out, or that is sometimes thrown out, is this idea of called like greasing the groove. Okay. And essentially what it means is you're going to take a light weight that you can do no problem, somewhere maybe, 30% to say like 60% of your 1 rep max for a given exercise. Okay. And you're going to do 3 to 5 reps. So it should feel really light. It shouldn't feel difficult at all, but you are just going to practice that skill of doing that exercise with some load. And just by kind of practicing that skill over time, you will become more proficient at that skill, which then outwardly will allow you to use more weight with that skill. Now, the disclaimer to this is The point of getting stronger by doing exercises is not so you can use more weight when you're doing the exercises. The point of getting stronger from doing exercises is so your body functions better, okay? So just a little bit of disclaimer in that regard, like this can seem to be not going in the direction of building the health and function of your body, but it will be a way for you to improve this skill of using your body, doing certain movements, recruiting a certain group of muscles, and over time, you will see an improvement in your ability to do that under greater amounts of load.
Charlie, I've actually never heard of greasing the groove before, but now I've learned it and you guys have learned it. But I do use this concept because what's really interesting is that every time I have a client that starts with me, or I have a client that takes a break and then restarts, the greatest quote unquote strength improvements that we see, because I track all the, the weights my clients are using, the reps and, the machines and movements, all that stuff. The time that I see the greatest and most rapid increase in strength is in the first few months. And it's not because they actually got stronger faster during that period versus the second 3 months or the third 3 months or the four, on and on and on and on. But what happened was that their body is getting used to doing the movements and is really honing in on the skill of doing the movements. I mean, think about the last time you tried a new skill. For example, I think a lot of people are pretty unfamiliar with like ballroom dancing, like dancing with a partner. That's usually pretty foreign to a lot of people. But I think a lot of people have sat in on maybe like one class or two classes. Think about those first couple minutes when you're like, holy crap, I have to do a step to the right and a step to the left. This is blowing my mind. It's very difficult. And I've got to hold my partner's hand, and put the right pressure there. And it's like you're learning that skill. And so it's very difficult for you to execute that skill with some kind of smoothness, with some kind of, it looks sort of good and not robotic. And then to put some kind of music to it, it adds a new layer. It kind of is like what happens with exercise, is that we have to build the skill of exercise. I think we oftentimes will incorrectly label like sports as having skills or like catching a ball as having a skill, but lifting weights in a safe manner and in an unsafe manner, both require a bit of skill. And so by practicing the skills, you will be able to increase strength in quite a rapid way, actually, I think. It's also a good reminder to always be practicing the skills, obviously. But in the end, you executing the exercises correctly with the appropriate skill is what's going to create strength in your body. At least if you're listening to this podcast, you guys know that we're always talking about exercise for health, exercise for your life. And what that means is it means that your joints are improving when you exercise. They are not becoming more disabled. Like if you've listened to any of this podcast or any of the other podcasts, we are not in the name of the game for you to be leaving worse than you left or leaving incredibly sore or feeling damaged when you leave. So creating skill training almost in your workouts, which can happen in, every time I get on a machine, I do, 3 to 5 reps that are lightweight and I just practice the skill that I know I need to be doing when I go heavier. That's an easy way to implement this.
So there you have it. There are 3 ways that you can start increasing your strength without increasing the load that you're using while you're working out. And again, this is important, as Julie was saying, because it will minimize the potential wear and tear on your joints that can come from using really heavy loads over an extended period of time, especially if your muscles aren't working as well as they should, while at the same time still capturing some of the really cool benefits that can come from improving your strength and ultimately improving the function of your body overall. So if you're looking for a way to start increasing your strength, to start exercising on a consistent basis from the comfort of your own home, if you're like, you know what, all this sounds great, but I'm not interested in going back to the gym right now, that's okay. Because we have a solution for you. It's called the MAS at-home workout program. And this program is all video guided workouts that will teach you how to use exercise to build the health and function of your body And we do it over the course of 75 days with over 100 workouts packed in, from resistance training to cardio to mobility workshops and recovery days to keep your body feeling good and keep you consistent with your workouts. So if this is of interest to you and you want to learn more about it, head to homeworkout.matschaumburg.com to learn more, read up on it, see the awesome testimonials from all the people that have done it so far, and download your copy today. And while you're online, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.